Hello, bootstrappers.
All right. Hello, bootstrappers.
Morning.
Eva and I have been working hard on trying to come up with a brand strategy. It's part of our, walking the walk as we talk the talk. It's a lot of work. So we got Laura. Is it Busche? How do you pronounce your last name?
It's a Busche. It's
Busche,
German,
okay.
So it's like a silent E at the end. It's very weird.
That's okay. So we worked through the lean branding book. One thing I will say, and Eva will probably
Hang on, right here. This is amazing.
Is you get a lot of books and there's one idea every 50 pages. This is a really dense book. I don't know. What did you think, Eva, when you were reading through it?
That was incredible. It was really dense. We basically dove into chapter 3, and chapter 3, this is the first time I've gone through like a series of branding exercises where as we were doing it, it all made sense. And we would work through one or two of the exercises, and the next steps on our path became clearer. And it was just, I was like, so this is what branding is supposed to be like.
And, you would think we would have done a lot of branding because we had the largest dating site on the internet, but we muscled our way through superior distribution and kind of avoided the branding strategy. But I would say when we sold, I had the aha moment of where the brand Match.com, whose businesses was in shambles, sold for the same amount of money we did. And I feel like we left $100 to $200 million on the table by not doing these exercises personally.
So I had a internet security company with our other brother Nelson, and we decided to name it Achilles Guard. And then we had run into two problems. A week after we launched, Achilles Shield had all these product announcements. I'm like, this is not good. And then here's the nail in the coffin. We got a phone call, and just somebody cold calling us, and they said, "Hello, is this Achilles Guard?"
Wow.
This is really not good. So we renamed ourselves to Critical Watch, and that worked much better. But then our first experience with the logo, it was this big eye that just stared, and some people thought it was awesome, and other people found it to be a little menacing. And so we did another rebrand a couple of years later, and finally settled into something that was a lot more polished, a lot more professional. It made a big difference, and it was a painful exercise for us because we didn't understand it.
Right. Ultimately, and it's something I wanted to bring up to Will's earlier point about not having shaped a brand, at least intentionally, at least in a structured way, with these early renditions of the startups you were building. Ultimately, what happens in those cases is consumers end up building their own stories around your brand. And that's what ends up being the brand story. It's just they have to do a lot more on their own. And there's a lot of word of mouth that goes into shaping who you are versus perhaps you controlling the narrative or you trying to shape how the brand is perceived. So there's always going to be a brand story. It just depends on how involved you want to be in it. And I think that's one of the core messages of lean branding too, that if you're not actively taking part in the development process, you're still being branded. It's just not something you have an impact on or something you can mold. So having said that, I think that's a great transition actually to some of the content I wanted to share with you and viewers with regards specifically to your case, but I think there's lots of tidbits here that are going to be helpful for their own startups. So I'm just going to share my screen. Is that
perfect?
That's perfect.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Awesome. Okay. So first off, in reading lean branding or in listening to this conversation, you are going to hear about some concepts that are not strictly business or that are not strictly, Silicon Valley vocabulary or Silicon Valley jargon, because the way that I've shaped the definition of a brand, the concepts around brand building is infused by these three disciplines that I think are very complementary and that are the only or have been the only way in which I've been able to truly harness the impact of a brand. When a brand is well shaped, it's not just about this intangible asset that you have in your balance sheet, which would be the traditional business vision of what a brand is. It's an intangible asset and it's worth X amount. You get someone to value it for you. And that's how I started my career. But really soon I found that this definition of a brand, it just lacks. It leaves you with the notion that a brand can't be felt and it can't be touched. The intangible aspect of it really bothered me in a way. So I proceeded into the field of design, which, as you all know, we are either consciously or subconsciously affected by thousands of design decisions in each product we interact with on a daily basis. So what that means for brands is you can use specific visual symbols to capture the story that your business wants to bring to the marketplace, the value that you add to consumers' lives. And this is where design's, emphasis on the symbolic meaning of graphics is really key, because you get to capture those meanings, send them, communicate properly, share your brand story effectively, all of that. And then lastly, there are some concepts around psychology, consumer psychology, of course, because once those graphics, once that story and that strategy is out there, it's truly about how you're being perceived, what's happening in the relationship between the brand and the consumer. So holistic is a word that gets thrown out a lot, but it truly is crucial when you're building a brand to understand that you're not just doing this from the traditional business approach. And this is something I actually think we can all relate to. People feel like branding is something so foreign. Like branding is something marketers do. I don't know if you can relate to this, or something designers do.
I thought you had to be a big company to do this originally. Like I just assumed only if you hired a Madison Avenue firm to do it. But now with like Instagram or YouTube, people brand themselves all the time.
Absolutely. And it's empowering. It's also a huge responsibility. But I like to stay in the empowering realm, right? Like if there are specific actions, specific strategies that you as an early entrepreneur, as someone who's just getting started, if there are things you can do to start building this brand, I've made it my mission to kind of send those your way. And in that, I feel very aligned with you guys' mission with this channel. The reason there's a pizza here, sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm getting hungry looking at the pizza.
Why is there a pizza?
Well, I've watched some of your YouTube presentations, and this pizza, as I'm looking at it, it reminds it. So we have like 4 favorite pizza places in Austin that we rotate depending on our mood and depending on kind of what we're connecting with that night. And I think that's what this is pointing to.
Well, you see, I didn't even show you a logo. There isn't even like a store sign here, but you brought to mind these specific businesses. And that's the way brand stories ultimately operate. They're stored in your memory as a customer of these places. And when you see something, in this case, this would be a positive association. Like, this looks like a good pizza, right? Mm-hmm. If it were, I don't know how you could convey
like a frozen pizza.
Right. If it looked really bad, or like no cheese, or it was just turned upside down, or something really dramatic like that, you probably wouldn't have thought of your favorite places necessarily.
No, even as you're talking, I'm thinking about like some pizza I've had that had freezer burn, or like the cardboard pizza we ordered and it was delivered. And yeah, totally flipped to completely different pizza providers.
And that's why psychology and consumer psychology in particular are so key here, because in the business world, we tend to forget that there are some associations that are getting built in the background. And that's probably why your dating site, even though you didn't, at least, intentionally or in a structured way, build this brand or invest in a design firm that would create these visual assets for you, even though that whole part of the process didn't happen, you still had a brand. You still had a message that was getting built.
We had some very good designers who did do a good job of making it look right visually. There just wasn't a brand story. I realized there was a deeper level that we didn't go to.
But consumers did.
Oh,
so
yeah. No,
I think
people make up a story about you whether you want them to or not.
Absolutely. And that's a great place to start. Something I always ask when we're getting our feet wet with the whole branding concept is look at this slide and try to think of the first thing that comes to mind. I want to hear from you guys. What's the first thing? That
Burger King, the king, the guy who is the really goofy spokesperson they have.
Okay. There's a smell to Burger King. Like they definitely, they pipe out the griddle, like the smell of the burgers being grilled. And there was the smell for me.
Those are two great ones. I had heard about the spokesperson, but not the smell. And you are 100% right. There is a smell. This is the most common association though. And granted, not all Burger King burgers look like this. But most people...
I've never had one show up that way.
Right. But most people do think of the burger, like the actual
the Whopper
food item. Exactly. And they've actually branded it. So it's not a burger, it's a Whopper, and there are different kinds of Whoppers. And in that, they've been really effective. So this would be your most common association. But as we saw in your own examples, there are dozens of other touch points that come to mind when the average consumer is exposed to this graphic. The reason I bring it up is nobody talks about the red or the yellow or the blue or these shapes or how polished it looks, the circles. Nobody strictly refers to the graphic aspect, though they are being influenced by certain design decisions that we may or may not be aware of, like the use of primary colors to keep things moving fast, which is very common in the fast food industry. But these other items, service components, aspects of the user experience design. I mean, they don't have a digital product, but they do have a user experience that's intentionally designed. Places are structured in a certain way. Point of sale is designed very consistently. Some people remember ads. Some people remember the last person who served their burger when they were there. And it's truly all over the place when it comes to associations. But in each customer's mind, there's a story that's getting built. And it's not necessarily a one-to-one match with the story that Burger King intentionally wants consumers to remember. But in the end, this is what the brand is, right? It's the story that consumers recall when they think about you, when they talk about you, when with friends or colleagues or family. This is the essence, like the heart of the brand. And when we look at a brand that way, we all realize that we can really build this. I mean, it's in our hands to develop a brand. It doesn't have to be the expensive Madison Avenue agencies all the time. It can also be a visionary with a dream, a startup with limited resources that can do, in your own words, smart work, right? It's in everyone's hands.
Yeah. Can we go back 2 slides?
Yep. Okay.
To this one. So this is really cool. So you're saying that basically like a logo or a consistent image is a placeholder for the memories or a placeholder for experiences. And that's really cool. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, when we were kids, when we would take road trips, we always stopped at McDonald's because McDonald's, like, and they built a reputation about having the cleanest restrooms. And so that was the place to stop.
They also made it an intention to be present in most highways, like most highly transited highways, precisely so that they'd become the roadside go-to place for fast food.
That was the stop. But yeah, it was just this something about this slide really struck me that yeah, it's not the logo standing on its own. The logo becomes the placeholder.
Exactly. It's a device ultimately. And it's not how people traditionally think of brands, because when you talk about a rebrand or, hey, I'm going to design my brand, or can you design my brand? Most people think or go directly to the logo and supporting assets, color palette, type scheme. And while all of those are important, they're important because they capture this story. Like, they're important insofar they can capture this and communicate this. And the most common mistake is to go immediately to the blank canvas, try to create some vectors without having your story, fully distilled, clear in your mind. And if it's hard for, us, imagining a designer who is just not part of the business, they haven't been part of the conversations, and you're tasking them with something that is truly mission impossible. So even if
Create
you're
magic. Create magic
right,
from nothing.
read my mind.
Yeah.
Or imagine, the things we've been talking about for the last few months, like, just absorb it. And it's challenging, right? So if whether you're designing this yourself, because some founders do just take this on their own, and I'm talking like Google, like this happened to Google when they started. They just designed their logo in GIMP. I think that's what it's called. It's like a free vector program. They just took it on themselves to design it. So even if you're not that person, even if you're someone who's thinking about hiring out, the clarity in your creative brief is just going to give you much better results when it comes to outsourcing.
Funny, we talk to a lot of technical or non-technical co-founders, and it's the same with code, right? You've got to understand the language enough, not the technical language, but the engineering language to give good directions, or you get back bad product or bad result. And I think it's the same with design.
So that just brings us to this notion of, okay, the brand is truly the story that consumers recall. It's not just the logo. I don't have to be a designer to think about this. This is actually a very strategic decision. This stands at the core of what you're about to launch to the marketplace and how you're about to be perceived by your target audience. So in that respect, lean branding talks about three main components of a brand. The heart being the story. Then you have a set of visual symbols that capture that story and differentiate you in the marketplace. Like, that's their role. As you were saying earlier, it's about a device, like looking at these graphic assets as a tool versus the sole reason your brand exists, or the sole distinguishing factor of your brand. And then lastly, there's a strategy with which you communicate that story and those symbols effectively in the marketplace. Having said that, I do have recommendations for each of those three components.
Okay.
Based on the work Eli's did specifically for Bootstrap Revolution, which, is it a final name or is it a working name?
It's a working name. We don't know yet, because there's a framework called Bootstrap that people use to build their websites with. And so we're unsure if we can ever get enough traction to kind of coexist with that. So, we looked at Bootstrap Revolution, Bootstrap Nation, Bunker Launchpad. I like that one, but I felt it was too much about us, maybe, because this isn't really about us. We've already done our journey, even though we're continuing on other adventures. We're trying to help people on their first adventure.
Right. I think I saw one of your most recent videos is using that name, the Bunker Launchpad.
Yes.
Perfect. It's good that you're experimenting with it, because setting something in stone as early as we are right now is not going to help us truly read the marketplace, read what viewers are asking for, how they're reacting to these videos. That's also valuable feedback that you can incorporate into the naming process. So I think it's wise what you've done of not going out with a high fidelity name and logo right away, but kind of testing the waters and seeing what's out there first. I think that's really healthy. And there are, reading the exercises you guys shared, there's just a lot of clarity around what you want, what you don't want, what you're trying to do, what you're not. So these are just a few suggestions. Most of it, was just ready to implement, ready for execution. These are caveats and little details here and there that I think, you can think through a bit more or maybe think about differently. So I'll just go through them.
Okay.
And then you can
Super.
obviously interrupt me and ask questions if something is unclear. Okay. One of the key aspects that I found in your pre-work is that you're very clear on wanting to empower entrepreneurs who want financial freedom without asking permission. This is straight from your positioning statement. You're trying to build an entrepreneurial YouTube channel that teaches real skills to enable viewers to develop their full toolkit. Unlike other channels that would stroke your comfort zone or you just use magical thinking, this product is going to enable you to fill your skill gaps so you can build the business you've dreamed of. That to me is very solid. There's an aspect involved in early stage startups, which is, yes, you can learn everything you need to learn, but it's not always convenient. It's not always profitable for you to invest your time in learning all of the different skills. Sorry, Will, you were going to say something?
The distinction I would make there, and I totally agree, because, we both hired a lot of people to do a lot of things, is that you have to know enough to manage the person you outsource to.
Yeah, to be able to communicate clearly the direction, the requirements, what's needed.
So kind of like, I noticed in the book, you've got this sheet that you fill out to give your visual designer, and it requires a lot of deep thinking because, you've got to know what you want to get it out of them.
And once you get it back, you need to know just enough to understand if what you're getting is right.
Yes.
So is the feedback there around full toolkit, or like, is that overshooting what our real intention is? Because the real intention is the gaining knowledge in these domains to the level that's smartest.
I think the feedback is around an addition to the toolkit positioning, where you say, we're gonna share this knowledge. Some of it is gonna allow you to do all the tasks from start to finish, and some of it is meant to inform how this process can be outsourced, or some of it is gonna give you just enough knowledge in this domain area so that you can effectively buy what you can't make, and kind of weigh the benefits and costs and understand when it just makes more financial sense for you to outsource something.
Yeah, it is about being able to make the smartest choices and
Absolutely.
speed, money.
And a lot of it's, what percentage of your runway does this eat up? Now if it takes you a long time to do something, that eats up a lot of runway. If it costs a lot to do it, that eats up a lot of runway. And so it's balancing that out. So we just got to figure out how to put that into the position statement.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I think you guys got this feedback 100%. That's exactly what I meant. Something else that I ran into was your personas. You've defined a set of customer personas that range from, correct me if I'm wrong here, range from the strictly tech-focused programmer, so someone who's very much an engineer, I believe.
Yes.
And it spans all the way to a marketer. So someone who has zero coding knowledge.
It's kind of the three basic founder types who have massive holes in the three things you need to know to get a startup off the ground.
Exactly. I'm going to share something, I was thinking about as I was reading this.
Ooh, I like how
may or may not be 100% accurate, because I know you're still thinking through these personas and nothing is clear cut, black and white. There are spectrums to everything. But one of the challenges I think you'll face is these two personas in particular, the engineer, someone who's code savvy, who has the technical knowledge, is very different from your marketing savvy entrepreneur. These two human beings operate on an entirely different set of skills, personalities sometimes. I don't know if you've found this, but there's also an introvert extrovert scale to play with here. When it comes to people who have spent more time in sales and marketing, there's a tendency to be more on the extrovert side of the spectrum, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and what I think I'm hoping for, and Eva may have a different opinion on this, is that we end up with the pragmatic. At the core, they're pragmatists. Like that's the core thing, is they're willing to do the stuff they're not comfortable with to get the result they want. And that I hope because there has to be a thread that ties these people together. Otherwise, you're right. The marketer and the engineer don't talk the same. But, I think Eva and I both just said, well, whatever we're not good at that's in the way of us getting this business, we're going to do. Like, we'll figure it out. We got to figure it out.
Absolutely. And you just, that's a great translation for this next idea, which is, yes, like the next step here is finding topics of common interest. And the idea of pragmatism, I agree with you, is a common thread. These are people who want the independence to build it. Whether they're the marketer or they're the engineer, this is common to them. They like practical tools. They're not into magical thinking. And that's something I saw in several places in your pre-work. And that's just spot on. It's a great read on the people that would watch a channel like this. And then there's also the idea of creative control. If they wanted to leave this in someone else's hands, they wouldn't necessarily be the person watching this channel. And, trying to really nurture their skill set and understand how things work, like how their foundation works. Again, regardless of whether they're doing this themselves or hiring it out, these are people who want to have a degree of creative control, and they're willing to learn something in order to have that degree of creative control.
Yeah. Well, I'm an internal processor, so sometimes it takes me a minute, but I'm really, really digging this. Even the slide before where it teased that of Will, because we spent a lot of time talking about this, the pragmatic, and so this right here kind of points out the hazards of the potential different personas. And when we went through the process, we looked at, our core philosophy is there's these three legs to the stool. And if you're missing one, then the stool isn't going to be stable. And so that's great. But missing is, what is that commonality? And to go into the Venn diagram, it's just really great, because I became aware, and when you're highlighting the dangers, I became aware of the question, are we, by picking those personas, are we potentially going to split our energies into too many different directions, into too many different domains? But then coming to the finding topics of common interest brings it back together, so that I have more clarity around, even though we're going to be in different domains, here's a commonality that we need to make sure that we're clear about when we're doing interviews, clear about when we're doing demos, clear about when we're offering new ways of thinking. This is really great.
And in my experience, it's also about products. The types of products you offer vary depending on people's learning styles. And though that's a very individual trait, it's also very much a career trait. People just gravitate towards certain careers because they have certain personalities that align well with the demands of that career. You can't be a salesperson if you're introverted or heavily introverted, because I've seen successful people selling successfully while being introverts. They just have different techniques. But there are some overarching trends, I would say, in certain career paths. And so you can decide whether this duality is something you want to keep or something you want to resolve, or you're just going to choose one of the two paths. It's ultimately your decision. But if you wanted to keep this, if you wanted to still appeal to both audiences, my recommendation would be to go back just a little bit. And I think this is also part of the lean branding toolkit. It's in the book. It's where we talk about ethnographic observation and how to connect with that target customer on a more deep level. And you can do various activities here. It can be mere observation. You just watch, read online forums, online spaces. In real life spaces are going to be a challenge now, but
well, what I love about talking to you about this is the three of us have observed a lot of these individuals.
Absolutely. Founders are a special group, and they're made up of people from all walks of life, but there are certain profiles, and that spectrum that we were looking at is just very evident when you work with founder teams. And when they're well built, actually, when these teams are well built, you find all of them in a single group.
That's right.
Yes.
The difference here is I think you're talking to solopreneurs, aren't you?
At solopreneurs or very small teams, right? Because it's the challenge of getting from 0 to 1. As you get bigger, you can just hire people to do things for you. You have the money, the revenue to do it. You're just stuck before there.
And you may be at a point where you are the one person who has to complete all of this process. You are the one person who, if you're the marketer, you may need to learn a few technical skills. If you are the engineer, you're going to have to learn the marketing skills, because you don't have a co-founder to kind of balance out the team. So that's something I also found really interesting in the work you're doing, is you are empowering someone with a dream to build out, the whole vision they have for it, believing that they can learn what needs to be learned. And then the plus that I kind of added there was or hire what needs to be hired.
Sure, if you've got enough capital to get it hired, absolutely.
So my recommendation here, if what you want in the end is to keep these two kinds of profiles and find topics of common interest, is to go back a bit and either engage in observation or ethnographic interviews to characterize these personas just a bit more, with the goal in mind that you're trying to find how they're common, how they might be reached in a similar way, what kinds of interests are just common to them, regardless of,
There's so many blog posts. Like I sent one to Eva this week about, it was a female founder and she had a male co-founder from Facebook. And they used a lot of interesting words in there, but one of them that caught me was, even though they were successful, they had $800,000 in revenue, they were profitable, she was still apologizing that it wasn't a lifestyle business.
That it was a lifestyle business. It wasn't funded, right?
Because she didn't take funding, it still wasn't just a lifestyle business. And I thought, she's defending something that shouldn't even, why should she even care? But there was this defensiveness around, no, it's important what I'm doing too, even if I don't have venture money. So I think there are some commonalities in how people think and react and what they're defensive about, what they're proud about.
There's an audacity, there's a certain defiance in the people that are interested in bootstrapping in general. They just don't seem that interested in having others control their decisions, which, if we go back to the Venn diagram, creative control, the idea that when you take certain types of capital, you no longer have the independence or the autonomy to define the future of your business.
How do you feel about the fact that 9,995 businesses out of 10,000 will never get venture capital? there's a group of people, and I don't know how to reach them, who are hung up on raising money, and it's the dream, but they're never going to be able to raise money. They're born in the wrong place. They're the wrong person, the wrong skin color. They went to the wrong college, all of it, and they're stuck. And so I'm hoping that we can build a brand that will reach that person and show them a new path. But I don't know if that's possible.
I think it is. And one of the ways in which it is possible is precisely to amplify the cases you have found, your own cases, your viewers' cases, where a business has essentially grown with its own revenue, with its own revenue streams,
right.
Managing finances, truly finding product market fit. Because I can't believe I have to say this, but some companies grow without product market fit.
Sure.
They in this I don't know that we can speak about a bubble anymore, but in this financing reality for startups, sometimes you just have a cool concept and you find the right VC, and there's a personal element there, some kind of enchantment, and it happens. But A, that's very rare, and B, I don't think that's healthy. I mean, if what you're interested in is in the thrill of building a business and finding your margin and adjusting, the lean startup cycle, truly, build, measure, learn. If that's the thing that keeps you going, then this bootstrapping path is just really exciting to you.
So what I'll commit to is really digging into the blog posts of these solopreneurs and looking for commonalities between engineer types and marketer types. Where's the overlap that could hook them all together?
And then I have a question here about channels.
Yeah.
What I heard you say is to go and observe, interview, find out where they hang out, find out where they go for information, find out where they go outside of themselves, right? And then to look for the overlap. And what do we do with the overlap?
So when you find a channel that both of these different types of personas are consuming, that's a strategic channel for you. And part of this has actually already been defined in your model, which is you've identified YouTube as an effective way to send this message. And YouTube is a place that congregates both of those user types. Perhaps supporting channels is where it gets interesting for you. Like, how do you drive?
One that comes to my mind, Medium. Like, you have great marketers blogging on Medium. You have great engineers blogging on it. It's really a special place that brings all these people together.
You can also think of channels like LinkedIn, but those kinds of channels, for some reason, or perhaps I don't have the right connections, but they don't feel as engineering focused as they do, management and marketing focused. But you've identified a pretty good one. And more of those is I guess where we need to go to, just finding supporting channels that can drive traffic to YouTube, where they also both can be found, both of these personas.
It sounds like we may have to start blogging, Eva. I don't know.
Well, you can get these videos transcribed, and you have a content piece.
That's prime outsource material right there.
Yes.
Transcribe and then editing in-house.
You can take a single content piece in a format like video and turn it into audio only podcast, and perhaps text only medium, and just slice the same piece of content in different ways to reach different audiences. Part of that ethnographic exercise is also to figure out what the best format is. Now that we're talking about text, video, and audio, there are very specific ways in which different people like to get their information. And you might find there's a trend, I don't know, among programmers to want to listen versus read, or, maybe they have their videos on mute and they need subtitles, closed captions.
Right.
Those kinds of details are truly important. They change how the content is consumed and whether, the brand story reaches the right audience. So there's that. I also know you're going to be working with designers eventually possibly in a crowdsourced platform to find a visual identity that captures everything we've been talking about up until this point. And so I have a few recommendations when it comes to visual symbols, brand symbols.
Okay.
Based on the pre-work you did. So first off, visual identity, because of the people you're trying to reach and the stage at which they are, we want to make sure this identity feels relatable, it feels accessible, open, nothing that would present a barrier when it comes to, we don't want startup founders to wonder if this is for them or not, if this is too much, if they're not quite ready for it, because as you've described so well, this is for the person who is getting started in their adventure. And that's how it has to feel. Very welcome. Also, when you choose symbols, shapes, and typefaces, make sure they convey empowerment. We don't want, any kind of graphic that might feel too formal or too within the box. It has to be really energetic, prompt people into action, just make them want to move a little bit, want to get a little bit uncomfortable. I think that's also a common thread here in the work that I've read. Comfort zones are a no. And so comfort zones when it comes to these typefaces and symbols are also a no. Like, avoid cliches, commonplaces, all of that. And the message it feels silent, but it's actually very loud. When people read or like see your YouTube channel grid and they just have these thumbnails to go off of, there's a silent message that's very powerful getting sent there. You want to aim for a gender neutral color palette as much as you can, because based strictly on the work that I've read from you, there's going to be, this is not just for men or women or, it has to feel very universal.
The more the merrier.
Yeah, these founders come again from all walks of life, all preferences. Diversity truly is something you need to take into account.
I mean, that's why I wanted to do this with my sister, because I felt like if I just did it by myself, it's just another guy, blah, 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 blah.
There's a representation issue in the industry. It's systemic. I mean, and we're all just trying to fix it, repair it, find a way to get more representation from different groups that haven't had as much access to entrepreneurship or tech or design. It's true for all of these industries. So if you can make a statement in that regard, I think, aside from the fact that you are already a team that has representation of, you have a woman, you have a man, that already gives you two different perspectives. But if you can bring on stories from founders that tend to be underrepresented, I think that could also be very powerful.
We just had our first interview with someone overseas. Well, you're our second, actually. But it was a 15-year-old Zambian kid who's starting to build his first apps, and it was really fantastic.
It was awesome.
Wow. A mobile app.
Yes.
Yeah, really, really sharp young entrepreneur.
And you'll find thousands of stories like that.
Yes.
Entrepreneurship is brewing all around the world. And this year in particular has had the traditional Silicon Valley culture spread out even more, because founders are moving out and they're finding new places where their creativity thrives, and new places where things that exist perhaps in their community don't exist. So there's a lot of room for innovation. Cool. Something else I wanted to bring up is I saw a couple of videos about UX principles, and I saw one about navigation. So I know you plan to share some knowledge with founders about what's the right way to build a website and what's the right way to guide your users to conversion.
Oh God, we need to model it. Well, we need to model it on our YouTube channel.
we're trying to teach them the vocabulary of it. Yeah, we have no aesthetic. We're not designers, but like there's a vocabulary that you need to learn to be able to talk to people where we're going.
And it's also, it's like for me, it's the weak leg on my stool. And I think it is for Will too. So learning it and then, modeling the learning process.
Exactly. You phrased it really well. It's about not knowing it all, but showing that this is a learning process, that you are interested in this, that this is important to you. And having a tech-inspired kind of clean aesthetic could really go a long way in modeling out what this user experience best practice looks like. And then lastly here, because you have a video experience, it's not just words, it's not just layouts, you're gonna have to think about audio. One thing that came to mind was you definitely want something that feels energetic and fast-paced, but not overpowering, not something people want to mute, more something that could work as an ambience, but still makes you jump off your seat and do something. So it's a odd balance to hit, but hopefully you can find some background tunes or intro tunes that really...
Yeah, so this is like definitely for like an intro, and then at the closing, is that what you're speaking to, or during, or how would you think about it?
Up to you. There's some channels have kind of like a really low background music just to complement what's being said, but that may not be necessary in your case. The intro and the outro are two places where you'll definitely want to establish at least an opener, at least something that's consistent. I don't know if you recall out of memory Ted's opening.
Yeah.
There's like a water splash. It's become their signature, and you can be anywhere and hear that. And that's what we call audio branding, when this little sound just becomes so ingrained in the brand experience that it's immediately associated with the content you have.
Netflix has something similar.
Yeah. So something to think about. And then lastly, I have some recommendations when it comes to strategy. This is more communication related, how you share this story. And some of these are stolen directly from you, from the expressions I heard you mention in the channel, from some of the content in the pre-work. But I just wanted to summarize it in a way that might be helpful to you as you try to establish, what are our no's and what are our go-tos when it comes to communication. I saw a lot of avoid get-rich-quick schemes, no magical thinking, no comfort zones, fuzzy masterminds, this mindset that you can't make it unless you're VC funded, vanity metrics, things that don't really contribute to the bottom line or your business's survival, but somehow have become important, but they're not. Limiting beliefs, the idea that you can't do this unless X, those are like the areas to avoid. And as far as ideas to reinforce, I saw that you were opening each video with "Hello Bootstrappers," and I think that's powerful. Who had the idea? Be honest.
He did.
Okay, well, that was a great idea. I think helping people feel part of a community, helping them feel like this is a label they can associate with is pretty powerful, and a pretty powerful way to open the video. You want to make them feel like they're going to achieve financial freedom, the creative freedom they want. You definitely have a bias towards action, towards moving forward, even if it's in a scrappy, non-perfect, non-ideal way. You are more prone to recommending, make the change, start the company, send a message. You're more biased towards action. So I think something to keep in mind. Smart work, I brought it up before. Not more work doesn't mean better results. Smarter work means better results. And it's something you can own, reinforce anytime you get a chance. The opposite of limiting beliefs like a storm is going to ruin my startup. What happens to my startup is outside of my control. The government affects me. If I don't get VC funded, I can't do it. Those are all kinds of external locus of control. When founders and human beings honestly feel like they don't have control over what happens to them, it's always projected onto some external circumstance or individual. The opposite of that is internal locus of control, which I think is what you're hinting at in all of these different insights that you shared with me. There's a lot of, I'm in control, I can learn this, I got this.
Yeah, you're nailing it with this one. This is one of our big ones too. Sometimes we speak about it as having agency, the ability to act, right. The ability to, from within, see, make decisions, choose, act, to respond rather than react.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The skill gap topic where if there's something you don't know, you can learn it. And then eventually, if you have enough capital, you can outsource it in a smart way too, because you're going to know what quality means, what to expect, what to ask for. And then pragmatic knowledge, huge topic. People here don't want to learn for the sake of learning. They want to learn to put into action. They are watching you share some tips today and they want to implement them today, not even tomorrow. Like they just want to finish this video and do the thing you're saying. And that's a very distinguishing trait of the person who watches this channel. It's something that you can also highlight in the way in which you shape your videos. Like if you make your videos always have some kind of actionable takeaway, always have some kind of practical exercise at the end, I think you're going to be very successful at associating this with your brand.
That's good.
That last point, that these are just 6 ideas of how you can further reinforce pragmatism, the let's be practical here, let's make this happen mindset. Of course, you guys can brainstorm more tactics, more strategies, but I wanted to leave you with these 6. So progress transparency. As you learn, share with your audience, show them what the early versions of your work look like, not necessarily the final product. There's also tendency to only show the polished final results.
Drives me nuts.
Why? The other.
Well, you're on mute. I want to hear this. I can see you. I want to hear it.
Oh, so my first co-founder and I, our big saying was, we'll never be as crappy as we are today. It's just like, this is just the current version. It will get better. So, just keep putting it out there, rolling forward and not hiding that because it's very fake.
Absolutely. So for you, it's going to be even more important to show this transparency in the process. You also want to make sure that your stories and content feel relatable. So if you can bring on like that 15-year-old you told me about, that's brilliant. That's exactly the kind of content that makes people feel like they can do it too. Like no born into wealth. You guys know what I mean? Like no excessive privilege or resources that may not feel relatable to the rest of the population trying to do this.
And we probably will not be interviewing Elon Musk.
That's a good choice. I mean, he's really interesting, but he's
not relatable.
It's interesting though for this Zambian kid from Africa, because Elon's from South Africa, it is definitely a hero of his. Just because of the geography.
That's good.
Yeah.
As a role model, yeah, absolutely. He does represent. I'm a fan, so I'm sounding like I'm not, but I am. I admire him. It's just because of the essence of this channel and how you want to help people who are getting started in their adventure. You want to make sure that the examples and the the aspirations that you help them develop feel realizable. They feel viable. Yes. And maybe it's just a mix of someone who had it all and made even more of it, and someone who had nothing and nothing to lose and came up with this really scrappy idea, put it together.
What I find is it's so hard when you've really had major success to remember the tactical, practical stuff that got you off the ground. Yeah. And so yes, those other examples are very inspiring, and it may give you the energy to get up, but you still don't know what to do. And I want to focus on what to do.
That's the sense I got from your writing. Perfect. Behind the scenes, that's kind of, it goes along with progress transparency, but if you can show what other channels normally don't show, like what didn't work as well, or how things get put together, how they get designed, even something as simple as how you edit your videos might be interesting, because
oh Lord, has that been a beating learning? Yeah. I have learned more.
I heard you talk about the magic of editing, so
yeah, no,
show us the magic.
I've done more Adobe learning the last 10 days. Although I really like it. Like, it's a fun, creative thing that gives me a break from just engineering stuff. But yeah, it's very messy.
Premiere, is that what you're using?
I started off with Camtasia because it was more affordable to do my Postgres classes. But as I started listening to all these YouTubers talk about YouTube, they really talked about how the audio is so critical. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to step up my game and get into more professional audio. And I can already tell a difference in what it's doing.
Sounds like a video to me.
Yes.
I mean, perfect. Data-backed claims and actionable takeaways. The opposite of magical thinking is data. And I am actually right there with you when it comes to sharing advice that's unsubstantiated, that just came out of thin air but doesn't really have a backup. It shows, and it's kind of dangerous for someone who's getting started to rely on advice like that. They're at risk of investing the little resources they have in a really wasteful manner. I think the most responsible road here is to try to make your advice be connected to some kind of research or connected to some kind of empirical evidence that you've found along the way. You both have experience in this field. You've both founded companies and sold them. So there's a lot you can pull from experience, from reality. And the more you can reinforce that it's based on reality and not magic, the better. So that was mostly what I wanted to share with you this morning. I also didn't want to leave viewers empty-handed. I think
this is so great.
It's crucial if you're feeling inspired right now, you should sit down and seriously put your ideas on paper. And so this is paper. It's hosted at laurabusche.com/brandsheets. No sign up, nothing. It's just a PDF. It's not gated. Just go download it and print it and do do the first version of something that you'll eventually refine. Don't edit yourself right now. Just put all of those ideas, capture them. And hopefully this has been inspiring. And I know that the rest of what's coming in this channel is going to be equally inspiring.
Now, do you mind if we take people through kind of our pre-work and show them, because we took it, we're doing the exercises in the book. You saw the big thing we made of it, but it's all in the context of like, this is a great book. Like, go buy this book.
By all means. That's to our point earlier about showing the progress, showing the behind the scenes. That can go a long way.
Great. And then and we can definitely, we'll put the brand sheets in this link here in the notes. And we should reference that too, Will, when we go do the walkthrough of the behind the scenes.
Now, one question I've got. Now, we're going to take this feedback. I feel like we've got a little more work to do with refining the personalities, but you had some strong recommendations around the visual assets. How would you recommend that we get those created? I mean, we were thinking 99 designs and then have you review it with us to pick one. But do you have a better way? Like, tell us what's the most cost effective way to turn this into some symbols that we can start using on our channel?
And this is definitely a smart outsourcing path for us.
Okay. So 99 designs is definitely one of the options. I'd say the first step, though, is using that creative brief template that you referred to that's in the book and filling it out and seeing, if once you've got the full set of requirements and the intention clear, you can start evaluating options. It's hard for me because I'm a brand designer, so it's something I also do. But I can easily
outsource it to you. I mean, is this something that would be cost effective?
Well, I'm going to say yes, it is. Because so in part, I already know the brand. I've already analyzed it. So with most of my brand design clients, it starts out with an analysis that looks a lot like this one. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, when it's an established brand. And once that's internalized, once I know that, the design process is a lot simpler, I'll admit, because I have the story part, which is the inspiration for everything. So, I'm open to it if that feels like something you want to do. Also open to the idea, if you want to do something that's more crowdsourced or, just something different. Also open to helping you guys choose.
I mean, 99 Designs isn't free because you've got to actually pay for good design. So I'm open to anything that's kind of in that budget range. And so it would just be a matter of hey, if your recommendation is look, I can do a better job for the same kind of money you would spend there, I would love to hire you to do it because, I'm already bought into the process. So you just have to let us know what you think there.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll also, I think with 99 Designs, it's going to be a little bit more time intensive for us.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Because we've got to review them. I've done it before and it's
same here.
Zero work at all.
And you may not get what you're looking for. There's a risk. It might delay your roadmap. Like if you have very ambitious goals for launch and things like that. Let's do something. Why don't you send me just the basics. What budget do you have? What would make sense for you as far as time? Okay. And I can get back to you saying, yes, I mean, let's shape it this way. Because there are obviously different branding packages depending on what startups need. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not a startup and they need a brand book that's
big deal.
30 Oh, got it.
Yeah, and has to inform the corporation. And I've done that too, but that's more time intensive.
A lot of work. Well, you're looking at the corporation right here, so.
Good. 2 decision makers. Dream come true for designers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And Bootstrappers, it's funny that she mentioned showing you behind the scenes. I mean, that's really why we pulled this together with Laura, is to show you in, work in progress, even making a decision about, is it 99 Designs or do you go ahead and work with the person you're working with? I mean, in case you think this is, just way expensive or way beyond your means, go look at Laura's website. It's very reasonable what she's charging for the amount of value she's delivering. So I'm happy. And we're going to bring you another video showing you the results of, us picking the visual designs when we finish this process. Eva, what are your thoughts?
This is fabulous. I've got tons of notes. I'm actually going to go back and watch the video myself because I didn't write them all down. Really appreciate the time you took to review it, the feedback you gave us, the feed forward you gave us. And I'm going to go ahead and action one of those by reiterating an action item for you bootstrappers out there viewing this now. Go to Laura, busche.com/brandsheets and do the worksheet. Just fill it out and do the worksheet. For me, working with Will on things like this, it was like being duct taped to a rocket ship. And we just sat down and we just did it in 2 or 3 sessions. Do it fast and iterate, and then iterate again and iterate again. It's really about learning as you go and going back and reflecting and then making the changes you see. This was great.
Well, until next time, Bootstrappers, thanks.
Yep. Thank you.